Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of the Ruck podcast. For those about to pod, we salute you. On this episode, we get to F in the A to Z of rock. We have a new book for the Book Club of Rock, and we have latest news and 3 albums to review in New Rock on the Block. We have some hidden gems, and here he is, fearless and fast talking, my co-presenter, Mr. Matt Rogers. How are you, mate?
Hello, Brian. Yes, I'm neither of those, as you know. I'm a softie, and I'd speak very slowly. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Long time no speak.
Indeed. We've been busy. We've been going to gigs.
That's true.
And watching gigs on television.
Yes. Well, so we were right, weren't we, about the churn-ups? I mean, it wasn't that much of a stretch to work it out, and I think probably the whole world did. But what a show they did. Amazing. Hour or so. Obviously, the Foo Fighters at Glastonbury. I watched it live, and it was fantastic. And a good introduction for Josh Freese to about 70,000 people stretching to the horizon. But yeah, it looked great. I could never go to Glastonbury, by the way. I was thinking as I was watching it. I mean, it's probably a lot of fun when you're there, and people who go, you know, say, "Oh, it's great experience." But I just couldn't put up with the flags, and the people on each other's shoulders, and the big hats,
yeah,
and the lack of, you know, personal space and all that. I mean, flags isn't there for you? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a great experience, but I mean, you know, we go to a lot of festivals.
We do.
I don't see anyone. I mean, there's flags in the camper van, you know, park, as it were, so you can navigate to where
you're staying,
which is always, you know, it can be very useful when it's dark, of course. And flags similarly in the camping site and all that. But I just those flags just get on my nerves and the shoulders and everything. Anyway, enough of my moaning. I enjoyed the Glastonbury footage. Foo Fighters were great. I watched a bit of Maneskin.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Bit sweary. Obviously, you know, they, even though they're Italian, they worked out all the English swear words, which is fair enough, I suppose. They were good. Check them out. And they're not just a one-hit kind of Eurovision wonder, clearly. And then, of course, Guns N' Roses were headlining the Saturday night, and they've had kind of mixed reviews, but I thought on the whole they were pretty good. And I was talking to someone who went to see Guns N' Roses last weekend in London, and they were saying, well, the TV mix was possibly, you know, slightly not in Axl's favour, as it were, because his voice sounded great when they saw them in London last weekend. So, yeah, it was a good show, and yeah, it was good production. I enjoyed it. But you've been to a gig in person, of course, Brian. Or a couple of gigs since I spoke to you last.
Yeah. I'm just on Glastonbury. I really felt for the Arctic Monkeys on Friday night. Can you imagine knowing that you're the headliner on Friday night and guessing that the Foo Fighters are going to be 2 down on the bill from you? So I know there's a massive following for the Arctic Monkeys, but to me, Glastonbury was bookended by the Churn-Ups and the Foos, and then Elton John. And in Axl's defence, Axl wasn't the only lead singer who was having mic problems during Glastonbury. There's a few bands that were having issues with that, but the band sounded amazing. Slash was on it. Slash was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous. But yeah, getting back to live gigs, I was lucky enough to... a couple of weeks ago, I got to see finally one of my bucket list performers. I got to see Peter Gabriel. Peter Gabriel's been he's just started his world tour, the I.O. tour, and he's pretty much got most of his band that's been with him for the last 40 years. You know, session musicians, Tony Levin, who's played with King Crimson. Yes, you know, remember that. Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, everybody that in Yes that wasn't allowed to call themselves Yes. Tony Levin was a bass player. Manu Katché, who's played drums with everybody. And Peter Gabriel, for a 73-year-old man, played a lot of his new album, and then he peppered his set, Matt, with Sledgehammer, Don't Give Up, In Your Eyes, Salisbury Hill, finished it off with Biko. I was blown away by how great Peter Gabriel just captivated his audience. And then, thinking that I'd seen a great singer performing, Iron Maiden recently. And now I know you'll be going to see them soon. So Iron Maiden played Glasgow on the Future Past tour. Bruce Dickinson, it's the best. All I can say, Matt, I've seen Iron Maiden 4 times, and this by far is the best that I've ever seen Iron Maiden. Bruce's vocals were phenomenal. I know you saw him at Download last year, but he was singing even better. The set list for me was focusing on Senjutsu, which is the new album, which we've reviewed in the past, which is a great album. But then the 1986 album, Somewhere in Time, which is one of my it's one of my favorite albums. Features a lot of Adrian Smith. Tracks on it like Stranger in a Strange Land, the title track itself, Somewhere in Time, Heaven Can Wait. Oh my goodness, I was in seventh heaven. It was just phenomenal. The best I've ever seen Iron Maiden. And they could have sold it out. The Hydro was sold out, Matt, and they probably could have sold out another night. But to see Iron Maiden indoors, wow. It's my rock gig of the year so far. Bruce Dickinson was just, he was off the chart. Off the chart.
He's had quite a resurgence since he had his cancer issues, probably about 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And you're right, he seems to be singing better than ever. I'm looking forward to seeing them in a few days' time. So, if they're as good as they were in Glasgow, wow, it's going to be quite a show.
But the material very much for the older material that they played, which was they did Can I Play With Madness, which I know was off. Is that Seventh Son of a Seventh Son? Which I know is an album you like. All that era, it features Adrian a lot. So Adrian Smith was carrying a lot of the lead guitar duties at the gig, but I couldn't take my eyes off Yannick Gers. Yannick Gers seems to throw a guitar, jump on a guitar, sit on a guitar. He seems to do everything but play the guitar. And then at the moment where you need him to play solos, he impeccably just plays like Yngwie Malmsteen. But he's the most energetic guitarist not playing guitar on a show. He's I hope when you just watch him, he's in a wee world of his own, Matt. On stage left, Yannick Gers is on his own. He's effectively doing a yoga workout. Yeah. His legs are up on the stage, and he's stretching out stretching out over the monitors and stuff. He's having a ball. If he's plugged in, brilliant. But he's in his. Everything is good in Yannick Gers' world because he's just having an absolute ball running around the stage. So
yeah, you're right. Maybe he should get together with Tony Wright of Terrorvision and bring out like a workout DVD or something, Jane Fonda style. Because they both, as you said, they both jump around and run around. And as you said, for a guy who's I suppose late 60s.
Yeah,
he's very bendy and very obviously in good shape. I went to a gig last weekend. Actually, we should mention that. The stop off in London of the Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Mammoth, WVH. I think it's a world tour. I think they've been going for about a year now on this tour, and it was at Wembley Stadium, which is a very big stadium, and it was. I don't know how many people were there, but it wasn't full by any means. It was a very strange kind of setup, and it felt that the sound was bouncing around a bit too much. We got there early to see Wolfgang Van Halen with Mammoth. Obviously, came on at 5:15.
Really? Gosh, that early?
Yeah, it was really early. And let's say there were 50,000 people there at the peak. There's probably 5,000 to see Wolfgang in Wembley Stadium. At least I was there. I mean, I did my bit. But he was great. He did a lot of songs off the past album, first album, I should say, and a lot of songs off his forthcoming album. which I think is due for release later this year.
Yeah,
So
it's coming out in August.
yeah, indeed. Motley Crue did pretty much their hits. And I have to say, I've never seen Motley Crue before, and I enjoyed seeing them. Vince Neil has got a lot of stick for his vocal style, which is quite surreal at times. He doesn't really sing the full word anymore. He kind of just hints at the words in the original song. Thankfully, most people there knew the song, knew the words to "Girls, Girls, Girls" and "Primal Scream" and Dr. Feelgood and so on. But he's got a very strange kind of singing style these days. I'm going to leave it at that. But it's been a funny, we talked about Axel earlier. I mean, we've said many times, as singers get older, men, not necessarily women, but certainly men, there's an actual medical condition. I think it's where their vocal cords shrink. Mm-hmm. So, they're less able, and it happens to the best of us, let alone singers who were hitting the high notes back in the 80s. So you can have some sympathy for them. But yeah, very interesting vocal style by Mr. Neil. But it was fun, yeah.
And how was Sir Vivian and his main employers?
Well, they were great. I mean, they were fantastic, Def Leppard. They did essentially a greatest hits set. You're always going to get Pour Some Sugar on Me and Rock of Ages and Animal and so on. But they peppered it with songs off Diamond Star Halos, which was good. Yeah. Did a little acoustic set. And we were miles back. I mean, my friends I was with that turned to me and said, Matt, they look like ants on the stage. I said, they are ants. They haven't come on yet. But they were that far back. And we were that far back. I don't like relying on the big screens, but we had to in this case. But sound was okay for Def Leppard. And good to see them. I think I've seen them on most tours since about 1983. So good to see them again. And they I mean, they're just so polished, so professional. And if you get a chance to see them, boys and girls, wherever you are in the world, they seem to be on tour constantly. Then check them out. They were excellent. So yeah, all in all, a good gig, and value for your either £150 or £65, depending on which ticket you decide to buy. But such is the nature of those giant gigs these days.
So it was interesting earlier this week, Matt, that Wolfgang has been talking about putting the second album together, which will be coming out later this year. And their latest single, which is Take a Bow, clocks in at sort of like nearly 7 minutes. But Wolfgang has he said that he actually recorded that track with his dad's legendary, another F, is Frankenstein electric guitar, the one with all of the stripes, and Eddie was always constantly work. And he powered it all through his dad's original Marshall head. So kind of nice that, his dad's tone and his dad's equipment still being used to this day, which I thought was quite nice. And I'm really looking forward to his second album. Hopefully it'll be as good as the debut.
Absolutely. So we go from Frankenstein to Mechanical Bulls. A strange link, but there was as you recall, the 2022 Commonwealth Games. The centerpiece was a giant mechanical bull, 10 meters high, that was used, as I say, in the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games last year in Birmingham. And this bull, I love this story. I love these quirky stories. There's been a poll to work out what it should be called, and it was going to go to the scrap yard, to the scrap heap.
Yeah.
The great bull ring in the sky, I guess. And but it's been saved from the abattoir, which is kind of appropriate. And it's because when you find out what it's been called, 28,000 people voted, and it's going to be called Ozzy.
Yeah, Ozzy the
Bull.
Bull.
Pretty good. Ozzy the Bull. 28,000 people voted, and they decided it was going to be called. It's a very impressive thing. This mechanical bull. It's going to be at New Street Railway Station in Birmingham, and however, I do know one person who would be very disappointed because I was hoping it'd be called Tony after me because I was part of that Commonwealth Games gig as well, but it went to Aussie. So so Aussie, Aussie the Bull. I love that. If I get to Birmingham, I'm going to see it. I can't wait. And of course, it's made appropriate by the fact that there's the Bull Ring sort of shopping centre area in the centre of Birmingham.
Yes,
it that was where it all stemmed from originally. So, but that's great. I love that story, and I'm pleased it was called Aussie in the end, despite everything. Huge, this thing. Huge.
Yeah. Well, let's remember for kids our age, there's only one Tony, and he's a tiger.
That's true, actually. Yeah. I can't do a Tony the Tiger impersonation. I'll work on that.
It's great.
That's right. That's pretty much it, isn't it? Is it Frosties? I think Frosties. Yeah.
But other breakfast cereal brands are out there.
Indeed. Yes.
So my final bit of news last week, Black Country Communion completed the recording of their 5th album. So Joe Bonamassa, Glenn Hughes, the voice of rock, Derek Sherinian and Jason Bonham, I think went into a studio and in their normal fashion, Matt, I think they go into a studio for 5 days and just knock out an album. So that'll be winging its way probably, if not the latter part of this year, but early next year, which I'm looking forward to. I have no doubt there will be no gigs because I think Glenn and Joe everybody's so busy, but I'll be looking forward to hearing what Black Country Communion will be putting out as their 5th album.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and that therefore kind of completes the loop as to why Glenn Hughes left Dead Daisies, of course, to rejoin Black Country Communion as well as doing the Deep Purple stuff. So it should be good. The first 3 albums are pretty good, weren't they?
Fabulous.
And we saw them a couple of times, I think, and did put on a good show. Yeah, it'd be good to see them again if they do, as you say, they get their schedules together. And then one final piece of news. This is quite interesting and something to look forward to. Brian May, Sir Brian May of Queen, is talking up a potential Bohemian Rhapsody 2.
Really?
A follow-up to the 2019 mega film. But when you hear the numbers that film made, you think, well, yeah, of course you've got to think about a sequel. So at the box office, it made £720 million from a £40 million budget. So, why wouldn't you think about doing a follow-up? It just depends on whether the script's any good, of course. And bear in mind, it took 12 years to put together the first film. I'm not buying a ticket just in case. But that'd be good. I did enjoy that first film. It was a good film.
It was great.
A bit of poetic license in there, but and of course the cameo from Mike Myers was particularly memorable.
It was. It was.
That's it. That's the news, Bri.
There you go. So, Matt, we come to the part of the show where we talk about new rock on the block, and we have 3 good albums to review for this episode. Now, I must be honest with you. When you gave me this album to review, I did absolutely no checking on Wikipedia or any websites to see who this band was. So this is the first album, debut album from a band called the Elegant Weapons, and the title of the album is Horns for a Halo. So I stuck it on in the car and thought, I'm going to give this a good listen, and it sounded very classic 70s hard rock. There's a brilliant nod to UFO on the album. And as I'm listening to it, Matthew, I'm going, the guitars are very reminiscent of Mr. Michael Schenker. And the vocals sounded very familiar and reminded me of the singer for hire, Mr. Ronnie Romero. And I thought no more of it. And I thought, it sounds like Ronnie Romero. And then I listened to the drums and I thought, gosh, the drums sound reminiscent of Judas Priest, latter-day Judas Priest with Scott Travis.
You're quite the detective, aren't you, Bri?
Yes, and then by the time
all this out,
and then when I listened to the album and I finished my journey, I went onto the internet and I thought I must see who the Elegant Weapons are, and then I found out They're a supergroup that started off with Richie Faulkner from Judas Priest, Ronnie Romero from Michael Schenker and Rainbow, Scott Travis from Judas Priest, and who recorded the album which was Rex Brown. And I have to say, I think this is going to be an album that you will love. It's just laden with riffs. The production's amazing. I think Andy Sneap, who's recorded it as well, is really, really good. It's got hints of Purple, Uriah Heep. One of the standout tracks for me is Downfall Rising, which is reminiscent of Robin Troyer and Bridge of Sighs. It's just it's an expansive album. So I loved it. I just thought it was great, and it's signposting what Richie will do whenever Judas Priest, finally hangs up all of their leather and motorbikes.
That's true. Yeah, I thought that as well. A bit like the guys from Whitesnake have kind of started to expand their careers. I'm sure this is likely to be his long-term project. But yeah, you're right. I did really enjoy it. It's quite Judas Priest-like, as you said, in its feel, but not overly so. It's not like a tribute album, as it were. But yeah, it's a nice slice of modern heavy metal, and as you say, good production. I'm not the biggest fan of Ronnie Romero, to be honest with you, but he's pretty good on this album. You kind of get used to his singing style. But as you say, he's the kind of go-to singer these days. But you're right, Dead Man Walking's a good song, Blind Leading the Blind. Lights Out is the cover of obviously the UFO classic, which they've done a good job with.
I agree, yeah.
And check it out. Yeah, Horns for a Halo. And they're on at Steelhouse. We'll see them in a few weeks.
I'm looking forward to that. I think it'll be it'll be interesting to see the longevity of Elegant Weapons, but a great start with their debut album.
So where do we go next, Brian?
Let's go to Queens of the Stone Age, Matthew, with their 8th studio album, In Times New Roman. What did you think?
Well, I have to be honest. I'm not the biggest fan of Queens of the Stone Age. I think they're one of those bands that their fans probably absolutely worship them because they are quite they've got a certain style, and Josh Homme's vocals are quite unique. And they've had a few members over the years. Famously, of course, Dave Grohl was with them early on. But the album's pretty good. It's one of those albums that you really need to kind of immerse yourself in. It's got very complex lyrics. And very interesting lyrics, obviously from the pen of Josh Homme. So it's quite thought provoking. Some of the song themes. It won't be my favorite album of the year, but I think if you want something to kind of really kind of bore into and try to kind of come to terms with and understand the kind of sense of the lyrics and the tones of the songs, then check it out. In Times New Roman, interesting. Title, of course. What did you think, Brian?
I'm probably even less of a fan of Queens of the Stone Age than you are. Apart from the big singles in the early 2000s. I don't really know that much about them. So I came into this album kind of just I'll take it on its own merits. And it was like some of the opening track, Obscenery. It was. I was trying to think what's the right words to describe this album. It's snarly, riff-laden, really tight arrangements. Josh Homme's vocals, I was really impressed with him at the Taylor Hawkins tribute when they did the Bowie tracks, and I had never heard him live before, and I just thought, wow, this guy his vocals can go anywhere. And the standout tracks for me in the album are Time and Peace, and then there's a track called Made to Parade, and it sounds this is the kind of where he wears his influences, and don't forget the other collaborators in the band as well too are there. It felt at times Josh is calling on heavy talking heads with musical mashups between David Bowie. There's even hints of Mark Bolan. I was hearing Metal Guru in some of the track, and then when John Lennon was going through his Plastic Ono, sort of avant-garde sort of era. So I listened to the album a couple of times, and it's just, I think you've nailed it. It's an interesting album, and I think the more that you listen to it, the more you'll get more out of it. So it could be a real grower for me, and I didn't expect to like it, but I came away going, I'm going to continue to listen to this. The production's fabulous, but it's so 70s era. I was just hearing, as I say, the sweet Bowie, Mark Bolan, T-Rex. It was just really, really interesting. I thoroughly. It was enjoyable. It was, every track was just, oh, that's a bit different. But so well produced. So could be a bit of a slow burner for me, this album, Matt.
Yeah, interesting.
I
think it's one you do need to invest in. You know, you do need to kind of spend some time with. But yeah, it's well worth checking out, boys and girls.
And the final album for this episode's New Rock on the Block. Let's move back to more familiar territory for Brian. So This is Bridges. This is the 9th studio album from Steve Lukather. I suppose you could call him the band leader of Toto, singer and guitarist. I think most of the press junkets have been out, as Steve's been saying, this is the closest thing that you'll get to a Toto album. I think the reason why we're not getting any Toto albums going forward is there's an ongoing lawsuit between the Picaro estate and the Toto Corporation, which is David Page and Steve Lukather. So I think whilst that's either resolved or unresolved, Steve's said that there'll be no more Toto albums. But when you look at who's peppered throughout the album, you've got Joseph Williams, who's the current lead singer of Toto, who produces the album. Yeah. David Page, who's been Steve Lukather's partner in Toto for years. Alumni like Leland Sklar, who's played bass, Simon Phillips, who's played drums, Shannon Forrest, who's played drums as well too. So it seems to be all of the latter day Toto musicians have kind of contributed to this album. I love it, Matt. But you'd expect me to say that.
Well, exactly. You're a big fan of Toto. I liked it too, actually. It's obviously a far cry from the other two albums that we've been talking about. But yeah, it's got a very, I was listening to it this morning, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it's got a very kind of Sunday morning rock feel to it. It's quite mellow. Yeah. The guitar playing's exemplary. Steve Lukather is an amazingly underrated guitarist, I would suggest. Songs are pretty good. It's got a kind of a coffee table sort of vibe to it as an album. It's sort of very non-threatening, apart from the song "Not My Kind of People," by the way, which is a little bit cheeky.
Very.
Far from Over is a good song. It's got a good sentiment behind it, talking about the friends he's lost and the fact that he's still going strong, even though he's only a mere 65. Steve Lukather, had a very long, illustrious career, and he's still relatively young. But I liked it. There's a lot of double track vocals. There's a lot of reverb on the vocals. You know, there's a lot of kind of cliched sort of, you know, it could almost be, you know, an album from the early 80s or late 70s. It's got that kind of classic American sort of very polished production to it, but it doesn't make it a bad album. As I say, I enjoyed it. And it's the first, what do you say? Is that 9 solo albums?
Yeah.
As well as the Toto work. Clearly very prolific. And it's the first Lukather album that I've listened to. And yeah, I'd probably go back and listen to one or two others. Good. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, and for Toto fans, if you're wondering where this sits in the discography, this picks up when the band recorded the album Falling in Between, which is quite a heavy album. There's some Led Zeppelin. You know, it was a heavier album. When you've got that track, you know, the naughty track, as you call it, Matt, you know, Not My Kind of People, with sweary words. It's still got a good groove to it. It's good groove. It's got really nice, tasty riffs. I really liked it, and there always is going to be the sumptuous ballads on the album, and there's a great track which is called "I'll Never Know." Which when you're in that, you're back in the mid-80s, so you're in Survivor, probably Mr. Land with a lot of this. So it's a very, very modern production. Joseph Williams does a brilliant job, but it just takes you back to that mid-80s AOR, REO Speedwagon, Boston. You're back in the mid-80s, but a good release. One of Steve's better solo albums. I've listened to a few. This one's quite strong, but when you look at all of the contributors to it, it is, as Steve said, it's pretty much a Toto album under his name.
So, Brian, this brings us to the Book Club of Rock. I've been rummaging in the library, and you very kindly allowed me to take this book out to have a read off.
You need to bring it back soon,
Yes, I don't want to get fined.
Exactly, you don't want to be fined because we've got no budgets.
That's true. No budget for library fines. So anyway, this book is it's Rainbow in the Dark, the Ronnie James Dio autobiography. We touched upon it last time, I think, with that story of how he got his name from the New York gangster Johnny Dio. And this basically is it's the classic kind of autobiography. It was essentially finished up after his death by his wife, Wendy Dio, and Mick Wall, who's a very prolific and a very good music writer. And essentially it charts his early years growing up in New Jersey, where he was, his dad thought it'd be a good idea for him to learn an instrument, so he learned the trumpet. And Dio decided he was going to be exemplary at the trumpet, so he turned out to be almost a virtuoso and joined various bands, and essentially then joined other bands, became a bass player, and then for different reasons ended up singing. And then, of course, the rest largely is history. So it charts his early years. It's very well written, and you can hear it. You can hear Ronnie Dio in the words. It's not one of those ghost-written books. It certainly appears to come straight from his kind of memory, as it were, and with, as I say, things added in by his wife after his death in 2010. So, and it ends up with him headlining Madison Square Garden in New York in 1986 with Dio. So, as I say, it's an autobiography, but it stops short. And there might be a follow-up. I think there's talk about a potential kind of follow-up book charting the from 86 onwards. Obviously, that'd be obviously posthumously written by probably Mick Wall, I imagine.
Yeah.
But it's if you're a rock fan, it's well worth a read. There's some interesting stories, some sad stories, some quite uplifting stories, and really just shows you, what if you've got some talent, how far you can go with it. Because he realised that he was a good singer, and he thought, right, I'm going to take this to the top. And as we've said many times, was singer in Rainbow, singer in Black Sabbath. Fell out with both those particular parties, and there was obviously lead singer in his own band, Dio. But yeah, an amazing legacy, and a really good book. So yeah, check out Rainbow in the Dark, the Ronnie James Dio story. I put that back in the library now. I've actually finished it, so I can check it back in, Brian.
Excellent, well done. No fines for you this month.
Ah, thank you. That's very kind of you.
So, Matt, we come to my favourite part of the show, which is our walk through the alphabet of rock. It's our A to Z of rock. And we come to the letter F.
Yeah, already we're at F.
We're at F.
It's gone quick, hasn't it?
Yeah. We can kill some off quite easily, can't we? There's bands and stuff, bands that we talk about quite a lot. Foo Fighters.
Yes. Well, yeah, they're the obvious F, aren't they? Amazing band.
Yeah.
Going since 1994. Huge. Try get a ticket for their British tour.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, man. I've got one.
Oh, yeah, you did. Yeah. You're on the ball. I didn't manage it. Yeah, amazing. Selling out stadiums. Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. And we talked about their latest album last time.
Yeah.
It was an absolute classic. Yes, the Mighty Foo Fighters. However, Brian really should have started with the Mighty Free.
Yes.
What a band they were. Formed in 1968, only lasted 5 years. Did several albums in that period, all beginning with F mainly, which is quite handy for us. Tons of Sobs, Free at Last, of course. Well, Tons of Sobs clearly begins with T. We should have saved that for the T's.
Yes.
But anyway, great band, and some classic anthems, of course. All Right Now, and
When you think about Free and their legacy, I would defy any cover band in the world who somewhere down the line in their career, whenever they're picking out their set list, you've got All Right Now,
yeah,
Wishing Well,
yeah,
Steeler. Oh my goodness, it's up there with it's up there with Sweet Home Alabama and Paranoid and Smoke on the Water. Everybody's going to play All Right Now.
absolutely. But yeah, what legacy? Well, I mean, of course, the great Paul Rodgers. And they were only kids. Paul Rodgers, I think, was 18. Andy Fraser was 15. And Paul Kossoff and Simon Kirke were, I think, 19.
Yeah.
Amazing. Formed in 1968, first album came out in 1969. And as I say, they were finished by 1973.
Yeah.
And then, as we know, Simon Kirke and Paul Rodgers put together Bad Company. And sadly, Paul Kossoff died in 1976. And Andy Fraser we lost Andy Fraser a few years ago. But yeah, I mean, what an amazing band, a fantastic legacy. So plenty of Free songs. And if it wasn't for Free, there'd be no Reef, of course.
That's true.
Reef, famously, big fans of Free, and they decided to use the word Free as essentially an anagram of their name, Reef, which is quite clever. Very difficult to do it with many other bands, of course. I mean, AC/DC, I suppose, you can mix up their letters, but anyway, we digress. What else you got for us, Bri?
Well, I know Foreigner, that Brit-American, oh my goodness, juggernaut of a band in the late 70s and early 80s who just sold truckloads of albums. Their masterpiece would have been, for me, Foreigner 4. You had, oh my goodness, Lou Gramm, who just had the voice of a dirty white boy. There, see what I did there?
I did. That's a song of theirs, by the way, everyone, just in case you're wondering where Brian's going with that.
Yeah. When you talk about a producer, songwriter, and Mick Jones, who, Foreigner was his vision, but when you just top it off with a lead singer to die for in Lou Gramm, those early albums, Double Vision, Head Games 4, there was a point in the early 80s where they were just filling out stadiums across America. They could do no wrong. And then probably came to everybody, the rest of the world, when we had the powered ballad of all powered ballads. I Want to Know What Love Is.
That's right. And of course, Waiting for a Girl Like You is a similar kind of, classic power ballad, isn't it? We saw them, first time I saw them was High Voltage back in 2010 with Kelly Hansen up front. He's a great singer.
Yes.
And of course, they're calling it a day, Foreigner, sadly, after, a very long career. But yeah, what an amazing band. Again, some fantastic anthemic songs. You won't get too many pub cover bands trying to sing Jukebox Hero, of course, because that's a toughie. Kelly Hansen himself is an amazing singer, the current singer with Foreigner. Said that's the song that he doesn't really look forward to in the set because it does go through the gears for a singer. So, amazing band. I've got to mention the Friday Rock Show, Bri. We talked about that on an episode many weeks ago. But as we said at the time, for any person who grew up between 1978 and 1993 at RAN, the dulcet tones of Tommy Vance, of course, were part of the tapestry, part of our lifestyle back in the, as I say, the 70s and 80s and early 90s, and introduced us to many bands with their sessions, of course, and Friday Night Connection and so on. But sadly, I suppose no more. But of course, been replaced by the likes of Planet Rock and Kerrang Radio and so on, which are 24/7. So, we went from 2 hours on a Friday night to, rock music whenever you want it, essentially. But I mean, again, just an iconic show with an iconic presenter, the late great Tommy Vance, of course.
That's a great chat. And talking about iconic, another F for me would would be the space ace himself, the original spaceman, Mr. Ace Frehley, 72 years old now. Ace was one of the was the original guitarist in Kiss. He was in Kiss from 1973 to 1982. You'll remember in the late 80s, Matt, whenever Kiss decided that they'll put out 4 solo albums, and you would have expected maybe, you know, Paul or Gene to be the best selling of the 4 of them. The biggest selling artist out of the 4 of them was Ace, because Ace had the single New York Groove, which and I think that actually irked.
Of course it would, wouldn't it?
I think that irked the 2 main guys in Kiss. But Ace. I love some of the early classic lineup of Kiss, and I suppose Ace is one of those guitarists where he started the whole, smoke coming out of guitars. Right. Let's do lots and lots of stuff, and there's so much mystery and stories and mythology about, there's, what's the album, Creatures of the Night, which he's all on the album. He's featured on the pictures, and he doesn't play any guitar.
No, that's right. Famously, yeah. I think that was probably the end of beginning of the end of his career with Kiss.
He
didn't really feel like participating anymore, for lots of other kind of, let's say, extracurricular reasons.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with the F surnames, and John Fogerty.
Yes.
Many people say, who's that? Well, of course, he was the voice of Creedence Clearwater Revival, and for a while, one of the biggest bands of the late 60s and 70s in the world. And again, loads of anthems. We talked about them many times in the context of suing themselves for plagiarism or whatever that court case was all about. But by all accounts, still going strong. Did a recent UK tour and is sounding and looking and playing really well. So, yeah, good on him. But yeah, the great John Fogerty.
78 Fantastic. Years of age, and he still sounds, as you say, he's sounding great on his last UK tour. There's the reviews. So, yeah, fabulous.
Indeed. We mentioned flags earlier.
Yeah.
I'll dwell on them. Not my favourite thing. But of course, festivals. And we've talked many times about the various festivals. And not everyone's cup of tea, though, of course. I mean, some people just don't like festivals. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I think he's went to one festival when he was young, and that was it. And we tend to lap them up because they're not everyone's cup of tea. And as I say, if his first festival was a very crowded Glastonbury, I can understand why. But who doesn't enjoy the festivals? They've come a long way since when I first started going in the early 80s. As I've said many times, when my hair was several rows behind me, of course.
I'm a latecomer. As you know, I'm very much a latecomer to festivals, and I love them now. And I like the fact that you can, you go and watch the headliners, but it's really nice when you can walk away from a festival and you go, wow, there's a new band for me. I'll follow those. So it's nice to have a surprise. You can get a surprise for festivals.
Absolutely.
This is I have put a lot of thought into this one, Matt.
Have you?
Yes. That's
a change.
I'm going to try. I'm going to cover 3 Fs.
Oh, really?
I'm going to cover 3 Fs in one go. So we were talking about Van Halen earlier on, and we've got Wolfgang and Eddie, and you've got family. So, you think about, and we've covered in earlier shows, siblings and etc. But so for families, one of the biggest families of rock would be the Farris brothers, and the Farris brothers, who were the majority, 3/5 of or 3/6 of INXS. So INXS, who are sadly no longer a going entity. They recorded an album in 1997 with a fabulous producer called Bruce Fairbairn. Another F.
Indeed.
So now, Bruce Fairbairn isn't one of... We've talked about producers in the past, Matt. We've talked about, obviously, Mutt Lange, Martin Birch. Oh, my goodness. Roger Glover.
Last time, wasn't
Rich Fred, we talked about the last time. And we never seem to talk about Bruce Fairbairn. We'll talk about Bob Rock, because Bob's done lots of work with Metallica. And so when I was looking back at Bruce's discography, I couldn't believe in the mid-'80s the albums that Bruce had produced. I didn't know that he was the producer of Slippery When Wet.
Wow.
He also produced New Jersey as well. And then in that period in the mid-'80s when Aerosmith came back on the back of the Run DMC single, Bruce produced Permanent Vacation and Pump. And an album that I absolutely love, Matt, is, the live at Donington in 1991 with AC/DC, which I think is just... That was produced by Bruce Fairbairn. And he produced...
Oh, really?
Yep. And another album that is a favourite of mine is the mid-'90s, 1995's Van Halen's Balance, which I know that Sammy Hagar has been on record saying that that's one of the best produced Van Halen albums in the latter days. So I couldn't not leave Bruce Fairbairn off the list.
No, indeed. What a catalogue of albums he's been involved in. Amazing. Yeah, I'd heard of him, and I couldn't connect him to the bands, but yeah, what a guy. Couple of final mentions, Brian. One of the great rock songs, probably in my top 10. And when it comes to guitar solos, it's certainly up in the top 5. Is "Free Bird" by Leonard Skinner. Always whenever I hear it, it takes me back to the school discos of the early 80s, kneeling on the floor, head banging. Great stuff. And finally, a great album for a great band, For Those About to Rock. We Salute You. The 1981 album by AC/DC, and what a song, what a title song to that album. You mentioned AC/DC a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
I couldn't leave out For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. Sounds vaguely familiar though, doesn't it?
It does. Good title.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So that was the F. Next time, it's G.
Yes.
Look forward to that.
Yep.
So finally, that brings us to most people's, clearly not yours, but most people's favourite feature.
Hidden Gem Time.
Thanks, Lola. Sounded great, as always. So what's your hidden gem for episode 49, Brian?
So, Matt, my hidden gem for this episode is I was listening to Boston a couple of weeks ago. It was came up on social media that it would have been Brad Delp's birthday. So Brad's the original lead vocalist and rhythm guitarist in Boston. So it would have been Brad's birthday on the 12th of June. So I got a message up on Facebook, and it just got me back into listening to Boston. And then I was thinking, my goodness, when Boston got back together, who was the singer that stepped into the breach to replace Brad? And it was none other than Michael Sweet, who was the lead singer and guitarist in Stryper. Black and yellow and, Christian rock as they were. But Michael has worked with George Lynch through Frontier Records for the last few years. And
another F.
Another F. Exactly, another F. And
another pound in the pot for you, Brian.
Exactly, another pound. Pay me and Frontier Records. So the latest release from Sweet and Lynch is an album called Heart and Sacrifice. It is great album. Now, for those of you who love George Lynch's guitar playing and docking, and he can do all these amazing scales, he's going back to a much more rootsier, bluesier feel on this album, and it's just the mix between Michael's Boston-esque vocals and this really bluesy drop D riffy guitar in from George Lynch. It's fabulous, Matt. Standout tracks on it are You'll Never Be Alone, Where I Have to Go, and Leaving It All Behind. 3 standout tracks from a great album. Again, one of these project albums, but they still, I think this is their 4th album that the guys have done. So, my hidden gem for this episode, Sweet and Lynch, Heart and Sacrifice. What about you?
Well, I have got an album by the White Buffalo. Now, we haven't mentioned the White Buffalo on this this podcast.
No.
But the White Buffalo is essentially the stage name, the pseudonym, if you will, of an American singer-songwriter called Jake Smith. And he's quite prolific. I think this is his 7th album I'm going to talk about. It's the album called On the Widow's Walk from 2020. And it's great. If you want, as I say, want a nice slice of modern Americana, check out the White Buffalo. And I first came across him. I was in a record store, and I've only done this a couple of times in my life. I was in a record store, and there was a record playing, or music playing in the background, and I thought, I like this. And I asked the person behind the counter who it was, and they said it's the White Buffalo, blah, 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 and I ended up buying the album, which is quite rare for me to do something impulsive like that, or indeed to spend money full stop. But this is a good album. This is from 2020. And it's produced by Shooter Jennings.
Okay, yeah.
And it's on Snake Farm Records. So none of your frontiers with this guy, Snake Farm Records. And it features one of my favorite songs of the last few years is a song called No History. I absolutely love that song. So that's going to be on the playlist, of course. But it's short and sweet songs. Really well written. It's a great singer. He's a baritone, so I obviously like him. Great stuff. Check out On the Widow's Walk by the White Buffalo from 2020. There you go. That's my hidden gem for this episode, Bri.
Good. Thank you.
So that's it, Bri. Another episode in the bag. Episode 49. With a nice pink bow on the top, I think.
Lovely.
Yes. So next time we episode 50. We look forward to that. We'll do a bit of reminiscing. And also to mention, we've been listened to over 5,000 times, which is amazing. Thank you all for listening.
Yes, thank you.
If it's the first time you've heard us, of course, go back through all the episodes. We're available on Spotify, on Apple Podcast. We're, of course, now on Scotland Rocks Radio every third Tuesday. So check us out there. And we'll be back for the next episode in a few weeks, episode 50. But for now, thank you for listening. See you all soon. Keep on rocking.
Bye.
Those About the Pod, we salute you, is a Neely Rogers production.